Hi everyone.
Hello.
Hi Nathan. Hey, do we have sound?
Yeah. Thank you, sound. Cool. Awesome.
Okay, so hello everyone. I am Nathan. Some of you might know me. I'm an artist. I lecture part-time at FITS, and I also am a creative technologist, and I work in the sort of commercial space. So this is the sort of stuff I try to do on a day-to-day basis, which is, by and large, mess around. I'm going to try to find the presenter view because I need to see my notes. Okay, so as a sort of artist, I'm really interested in the way the world's structured and things are structured. I kind of really get off on learning how things work and playing around with that. So, cool. So, kind of to talk, I think the title of the talk that Ben gave me was Installing Play Something Something Creative Technology Something Something. Cool. So let's dive straight into it. So creative technology, I call myself a creative technologist. What is it? Well, I don't really know. It's the kind of thing you call yourself when you need to work in a commercial space and people want to know what it is that you do. So you say, I'm a creative technologist, and they're like, oh, cool, that's great. It gives me enough street credit to kind of to get paid to do something, but still be able to get away with not telling people exactly what it is that I do, and people hire you for that. So, the talk I was going to give today, okay, sorry. So, the reason why I've got all these weird gifts on is I want to talk directly to this idea around creative technology that I've been finding a lot in the commercial space and the work that I'm doing. And that is this idea of blue sky thinking. You hear these weird, ridiculous terms, and one of them being blue sky, and often people think creative technology is this kind of savior where you have really creative, smart people working with technology so you can do anything and the sky's the limit. Well, I want to talk about that's just complete shit, because sky's the limit, that's not true. There are very physical limitations to things you can do, and when people don't understand creative technology and the difference between creative thinking and technical execution, the kind of blue sky thinking is a really big stumbling block to getting things done. So, what I was going to talk about today was going to be very different, but I got robbed last week. So I lost the talk and all the documentation that I was going to show. So, in going through my archives and my backups, trying to put this talk together, I came across a kind of interesting trend in my work that I thought would be good to talk about here. And that was this idea of making do. So it's not about, when I say making do, I don't mean settling, but rather working with what is handed to you and making kind of use of everything as an object to play with. So I thought I'd still run along with this idea of how do you install play, and rather work as how do you bring play into a situation, an object, or anything that you're busy doing. So I'm just going to talk about that in relation to my work, and hopefully that's interesting or helpful. So where this first came about was the video I found when I was looking through my backups was a video I made about 10 years ago. It was, I got a new TV, I didn't know how to use it. So for about a week I had blue screen and sort of snow going over and over in my lounge. And for about a second, I almost certainly believed that there was like when I moved around the room, the TV responded and it was trying to tell me something. So what I did is I ran with that. And this section was sort of making with nothing. And let me play the video.
Take support.
Okay, pause it. Okay, so the previous video isn't working, but the gist of it was this, right? Nothing is very seldom enough. And what I wanted to talk about was how if you open yourself up to kind of the limitations and restrictions that are often placed in front of you, you can use it as an object or a material to actually work with and create something. So that video isn't working, we're going to jump ahead. And I'm going to talk about, very briefly, just some hackathons. So around this thinking of using sort of formal rules or limitations as a way to produce things, my partner and I started doing a whole series of hackathons where we try to really formalize these rules in a structure where we get people together and start making things. So with hackathons, you have to kind of use what's at hand and in a very short time period build something. So what it forces you to do is think through the objects you have and then try and apply your idea to these kind of objects and skills and navigate that space to produce something that you maybe couldn't have imagined from the outset. So we've done a whole bunch of these hackathons, and I just wanted to show you two quick excerpts from my favorite, which is the smallest hackathons we've ever done, to show you, to kind of talk to this using limitations as a productive force in what you're doing, or restrictions. Sorry. Okay, so this is the first video, and what it was is it's basically KISS activated lights, and then so this came about from, there was about 6 of us Bronco team down the road, and we had basic electronics and a really shitty idea. And the point is, I can't remember what that shitty idea was, because I'm sure someone had this massive out there thought that they were trying to run to. But because we had Christmas lights and Oriental Plaza fireworks, we had to make that work with what we could do. And this is what came out of it. Something we couldn't really predict, but it was really great. So the second part is still from that hackathon, where we just try to take the same tech where you could kiss people and like pick stuff up and apply it to something else. This isn't going to work with sound. But what it is, in a nutshell, is it's basically a chicken that screams whenever you cut it. So the theme for the hackathon was kind of hack for holidays. So it was all about the festive season. And we had a vegetarian in the group. And she very quickly notified us that she was vegetarian. And the problem with being vegetarian around holidays was everything's roasted. It's roast pork, lamb, chicken, etc. So that's what we did with that. Okay, rough start, but we're getting better. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is a project I did last year. Coming from varsity and doing lots and lots of fun stuff kind of in my ideal realm, and then switching to an office space. made life really shit because it's an office space. So I started working on a project called Office Exercise. So the general thinking was, I was in this position where I was doing work that wasn't bad as a creative technologist, but it wasn't what I wanted to do because I couldn't tell people what I was doing. You just wanted to fiddle around and see what happened, see where something took you. But in an office, you need to be able to say, I'm putting 3 hours towards this, 5 hours towards that, bullet. And where this project came about was I started looking at that kind of really bad situation as a material to work with to make it work. So the very situation of being in an office, I tried to go, if this was like an object, how could I manipulate or work with it? And this is where Office Exercise came from. So what's important is Office Exercise is a project that has its own interests, but it was produced by using the sort of limitations and restrictions you come across as an object that you can play with. Because objects that you can play with, you can manipulate and you can put in different combinations with each other and like produce fun stuff. So the first project that came out of this was something called mouse portraits. This is a series of portraits of my colleagues taken with a computer mouse. So what I did was I turned a computer mouse into a cat. And the important part of this project was, like I said, I had to always tell people what I was doing. And the loophole that I found in the office space was, if you're telling people you're training or you're upskilling, they more than happily overlook the product because the process of training is something you can pay for. Kind of, you can get new skills and apply somewhere else. So I found a way to keep doing what I wanted under the guise of whenever someone asked me, I'd say, I'm busy learning something. So with this, with the mouse, which looks like this, I told people I was learning embedded systems. And they very happily let me go on and build this project without ever questioning it. The second project from Office Exercise is something called IRA. And what it was, it's a desktop app that you use to communicate, that you use when you're working on Skype, when you text-based communication. So this is a very early prototype. Again, how the fuck does this sound? Anyway, so this was the early prototype, and what this eventually became was a desktop app ran in the background. Whenever you use Skype, instant messaging, anything text-based communication, when someone pissed you off, which they eventually did in an office, all you had to do was shake a computer, and it would basically pump out strings of profanities and send it to you. Yeah, so it was a really nice way to stop having to sublimate your emotions into like emoticons, because let's be honest, if you put an angry face, no one really takes you seriously. So that was sort of Office Exercise. And the reason why I'm talking about it is, it was just a product of being able to see my situation as a material, something that you can actually use to produce work. The last thing I want to talk about very briefly is the residency I'm on now, which is part of the Fucking Festival. And the basis for that was, the theme for the residency was there's 4 artists, 2 from the UK, 2 from South Africa, and we were kind of looking at this idea of a future Braamfontein or a future South Africa. So that's like a really, really weird and problematic thing, because as soon as you say future, people think of like flying cars and weird shit like that, or smart cities, which is fine, or like very dystopian views. But one of the big issues I have in South Africa and like kind of the African continent is we have a lot of informal technologies and social networks that make our cities function. But when we start looking towards a future that we just adopt whole scale and bring into our current space, what happens to those networks? Where do they go? So one of the first things I started looking at when 2 of the UK artists were looking at data collection and lots of like Internet of Things stuff, they couldn't get onto the internet at Braamfontein. So it gave perspective on how many wireless networks we have in Braamfontein. This is from a Sunday drive where I tried to plot all the networks just in Braamfontein, and I came up with 1,500. All of them being locked. So whenever you look at your device and you try to scan for wireless networks, you have essentially all these funny named ornaments that just fill up space in your device. that you can't do anything with. So again, jumping back to the idea of a future city, we get this technology like the internet, which is supposed to be this democratizing tool which gives access to everyone, but really it just creates another class, another second-class citizen. So I've started playing around with that, and that's what this device is over here. So this is one of the first things I started working with, and I want to demo it. So let me do it on my iPhone. So what I started looking at was, because we can't access the wireless devices to communicate or access Skype or social networks or anything like that, what about using the actual network names as a way to communicate, because they're in abundance? And it's a way to kind of reassert agency by putting yourself back into that space. So it's quite awkward because you can't see this. But again, this is Exquisite Corpse. Does anyone know the game that the Surrealists used to play, Exquisite Corpse?
Yeah.
Some do, okay. The basic gist of it was, you'd have a piece of paper, you would write part of the phrase, fold it over, pass it on to the next person, and then carry on writing, etc., etc. So you start generating this weird sentence, or you could do the same with the drawing. So when we were busy scanning through the networks, when I was busy doing the pitch you saw earlier, every now and then you would make sense out of the sentence, out of your wireless networks. Like 3 or 4 would actually form a sentence, or say something really funny. So this is Exquisite Corpse for wireless network. So how it works is you log in, and I get a web page which basically gives me different parts of speech that I have to enter. So can you play it with me? Cool. So basically, what you got to do is we each put in that part of speech. Hit submit. So it asks like an adjective. So you can do it on my phone. Let's do it on mine. So you enter the noun, and then this is the sort of thing you pass around. Yeah, go for it. So you can add that for it. It's quite awkward. Yeah, I just put it in. It's dragging now. I think it's done. Okay, so once you've done all of those, you send submit, and what it does is this starts flashing after a few seconds. And that's not all of it. Basically what it does is it takes all those phrases and it distributes it to a whole bunch of like small routers, and it turns your poem into wireless hotspots. So when that's finished flashing, if you guys go open up, if you go scan through your wireless networks, I don't know how to do it on this computer, I'll just show it. You all have phones. So all of them are prefixed, A, B, C, D, E, F, and if you go look, you'll see the poem. So ours is the red gun, fast, heavy, yellow boy. Jesus, you guys don't know parts of speech. Yeah, so this is part of the work that I'm doing for this residency. Yeah, that was awkward stuff, but that's me. Thank you very much.